implications for today, you mean?
Well, they were talking about doing
sports centre on the site.
Well, I think it would be. I think it should be researched to check out. If I'm right, I think it really does deserve. It should be World Heritage listed. I mean, these buildings are very rare anywhere. We have more in Victoria than anywhere else in the world as it is, and the major manufacturers are represented here. I've written about such buildings in California, which came just before the gold rush was here, and they had buildings of this sort. None survive in California at all. So this really is a unique collection of such buildings, and this is one of them. Let me now just...
Excuse me, can you show the... You had a quick view of the restored version, I think you said.
The restored... No, I haven't got the restored version. I went on to the interior, but I'll just come out and say it. That's the interior. What it consists of is cast iron columns, of particular sort I'll show you in a moment. These girts, these horizontal sections which can be bolted on and you eventually take them out of here, which could become an open farm shed with no horizontal elements. They're just there to carry the iron cladding and largely wrought iron roof trusses. This principle of curving corrugated iron had been developed from 1829 in England as an industrial system. Very efficient, very lightweight, efficient construction.
So you think the iron, the corrugated iron also is the original?
Yes. There's the form of the columns, there's the base, often called bluestone. And again, if you move this to a much later date, you wouldn't have got bluestone, you put concrete down. And there's the top, so the fitting is to join the top girt and then the angle on the top which supports the roofing. Now,
Miles, could I ask you, as Councillor City Garrett, could I ask you if you formally write to City Garrett pointing out the historical significance of this structure, because there is a structure plan for that triangular site on Queen's Road, Smith Street, George.
okay, well I can, but I've already provided information to the Heritage Council, so...
Yeah, well, that would, and the buildings there are marked for demolition, and I don't believe that has been identified as historical. There's another brick entrance building that is, and that's identified, but on the plans I don't believe that is identified, so that's quite a significant issue that you raised.
Well, seeing I think it is such a important, I spent a little time pursuing it. There's an English lithograph showing one of these buildings by Porter Brothers and Stewart, which is a very short partnership, because most of you use Porter by himself now, a year later Porter by himself again, but that's just that sort of building, it's a two-story. Here is the first example we found in Victoria many years ago, in the 1970s, at Port Albert. And you can see the base is the same, right up at the top. I now know that Port has sent a number of schools out to Victoria. This is probably the remains of the school at Port Albert. And this is the remains of a building which stood at Geelong until fairly modern times. It was scheduled for demolition, and the Geelong Historical Society took it apart, put it into storage for rebuilding, stayed in Seagull at Geelong for a long time, was finally given to the Sovereign Museum, and it went out recently, and that's what remains of it today. And you can see they're not easy to put together again. There's the base of those columns. Now there's a comparison of the brand. You can see at the top, that's the Fitzroy building after it's repainted. That's a picture by Willis Cable showing the brand. Here's the identical brand here from the Geelong building, now at Sovereign Hill. And this is the grandest of these buildings. It's not an arch-roof building, it's a conventional one, which stood in Russell Street, Melbourne, John Hood's Tom and Draggist's business. Now I'm turning to, in a way, a similar issue. Here is a building in America, a wooden building discovered in recent times. It's an old photograph, but the Kennedy Cottage was rediscovered in recent times. And the Berkeley Heritage Association got in touch with me. They thought it was by a local manufacturer called Ridley, who had a panelised building system, but in fact it was not. They did this survey, it was a detailed surveys, all elevations and plans and so on. They did a survey of it, but here it is being moved in 1906 from its original site in Berkeley, or Berkeley I suppose should be saying, Berkeley. And here is a building in Australia, which is by the same manufacturer. A man called William Elford. And this is a redwood building brought from California and now in New South Wales. Obviously of great interest, seeing that only one they found in America is this one here, and here's this one standing in the bush in Australia. And we have documentation. Milford houses were being sold by a local dealer in Melbourne from the 1880s, and this is where he got it from. There's the system of construction. You can see there the detail on the right. But even more remarkable is this example, which stands in North Fitzroy, in Tranmere Street. This humble little building is, again, an example of really quite considerable, I think, international interest, although much altered. Now, turning to more conventional buildings, and it's really pretty random ones that I'm interested in or check my notice, but here's a very nice early grocer's shop. I've traced the directory back to about 1900 or so, the grocer's shop then, with an unusual detail here, the store board, the part below the shop window. I assume, I haven't checked this out, that this is to light the cellar basement, light and ventilate the basement below. But what are those metal spikes you can see in the sill? Can you stop it sitting on the sill? Or so you can spike your yeah, got the out, of course, for shutters. And we tend to forget how these shops always had movable shutters. But there you see in the William Street Melbourne, a very similar looking building with its shutters half up and half down. So every morning you would sit down with your shutters, you pick them up, and you hook them into the space provided, and you rock a bar across the top to secure the building. This, of course, is not unique to North Fitzroy, but it happens that in North Fitzroy, for example, first of all, though, here's a most remarkable set of shutters which were acquired recently by Andrew Muir, Collingwood, and they come from Room Drummond and Co. Collins Street, Melbourne, dating from the 1880s. The iron cladding has been put on later and patched up, but they're a huge set. You can see the numbers spring up on this is the back face of the shutters. But in Fitzroy, we have a very remarkable surviving example of shutters in this building in Brunswick Street. Really lovely example. This, as far as I've checked it back, was a William Pinsent, a signwriter who had this place. There's the detail of the shutters on the right, and even more unusual is the door, which similarly has panels that secure the, no doubt, glazed panels of the door. This one is just a more conventional building, the Wesleyan Church, but it's interesting that the quarry allotments was on Nicholson Street. This is just below them. During the period of expansion, the Wesleyans secured this site for the church, it was government reserve, and they built on it in 1874. Whereas the Anglicans and Catholics typically didn't seek to be near their working class congregations. They sought more fashionable, better pieces of land further away. The Wesleyans were used to preaching to the Industrial Revolution towns of North England and were very much involved with the workers. So a little bit of social history just in the choice of sites. This design, although it's officially credited to Terry Oakton, is undoubtedly the work of Percy Oakton, who introduced this multicoloured brick, polychrome brick style. He, in 1871, was the winner of two competitions, one for the Wesleyan Church in Brunswick and one for the Congregational Church in East Melbourne, and he brought to Melbourne his version of polychrome brick in the manner of John Ruskin, and it's a hallmark of his work. Here are some of the ordinary houses, terrace houses. Now what I need to say here is, I don't know who designed most of the houses in North Fitzroy, and many of them would have been not by architects, and not exactly by spec builders. Anybody could call themselves an architect. And when you go to the tenders, many of these places were built by people who called tenders and were called architects, but had no real training. There was no control over the use of the word architect. And these were very much like the work of Olaf Nicholson. And Olaf Nicholson and Norman Hitchcock were two people who built a number of buildings, I'm sure across North Fitzroy and certainly across Carlton and Collingwood and elsewhere, especially in the 1880s, and were really jumped up carpenters, essentially, if I may, as an architect, find a rather snobbish term. And how they got